Native people, Native culture, Native knowledge. Hi, I'm Jeannie Green, bringing you award-winning Heartbeat Alaska.
Bringing you national and international Native news, this is award-winning Heartbeat Alaska, the premier Native voice in Native programming.
There's a heartbeat, louder than thunder, revolution is in the air. There's a heartbeat deep inside our mother. Are you too cool to care?
Now, with Heartbeat Alaska, here's Jeannie Green.
Hello everyone and welcome to Heartbeat Alaska, Native news and Native information. I'm Jeannie Green. Thank you so very much for joining us. Today's program will inspire you, I promise you. More Than Bows and Arrows, presented by the 13th Regional Corporation, depicts society's contributions from Native Americans and Alaska Natives. It's amazing what Native Americans and Alaska Natives have contributed to our daily lives and things that we're not even aware of. Well, I hope this program inspires you to greatness. We'll be back with More Than Bows and Arrows right after this.
Navigate. Set your course. Navigate. Live by a creed, a model free of greed. Be true to what you speak and last Mohican. In real life, love your wife. My neighbor, do yourself the favor. When the words fall down, you're looking like a clown. Ain't no one gonna say that they'll take back what they gave you. It's like that.
Hi, I'm Steve Haldane for Coca-Cola and Heartbeat Alaska with more interesting facts about Alaska. Did you know that Russian settlers planted the first trees on the Aleutian Island of Unalaska? 3 of the original spruce still survive. Also, did you know that nobody lived on St. George Island in the Pribilofs until June of 1786? That's when Captain Pribilof himself left a group of Russian hunters there with provisions for the winter. I'm Steve Haldane. See you next week.
Heartbeat Alaska thanks Wave Wholesale Company, your one-stop supply source for village retail stores, food service customers, and government agencies. Welcome aboard, Wave.
Heartbeat Alaska thanks Era Aviation for sponsoring us through our stories. Era Aviation serving Anchorage, Cordova, Homer, Iliamna, Kenai, Kodiak, Valdez, Whitehorse, and 20 Western Alaska villages from Bethel. By the Nature Conservancy of Alaska, working with Alaska's rural communities to conserve and protect our natural heritage.
It's a reservation of education. It's a reservation of education. Big yellow bus took me away where I was taught a different way. Oh, I was told where I'd sleep away from stars and machines.
That's certainly a far different sound than the music I heard as a Kiowa youth. But those rock and roll musicians and the Kwakiutl dancers filmed some 50 years ago have something in common with me, our Native American heritage, our Indianness. And that's why it's important to me to give you some information concerning that heritage. 3 tiny ships, exactly like these, helped change life in America by bringing 104 colonists to Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. Those settlers formed the first successful English colony in the New World. But in reality, it was not a new world, nor was it unsettled. We are told that Columbus discovered America in 1492. The truth is, Indians discovered America thousands of years before Columbus. Before the colonists built Jamestown, cultural developments were taking place on both sides of the Atlantic. Even as great cities were springing up in Europe, Native Americans were also building cities and making scientific discoveries on this side of the ocean. Both before and after European colonization, Indians have had a major impact on the total development of the United States. That impact is more than painted horsemen attacking a stagecoach, more than bows and arrows. The most profound impact of the American Indian on the development of our nation is reflected in our very form of government. The distinctive political ideals of American life emerged from a rich Indian democratic tradition. That tradition can be traced to documents here in the National Archives. Universal suffrage for women, the pattern of states within a state, the tradition of treating chiefs as servants of the people instead of their masters, the demand that the community respect the diversity of men and their dreams. All of these things were part of the American way of life long before the arrival of Columbus. The first regional democratic governing body in what is now the United States was not the Continental Congress, which met at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Even the Virginia Colonial Assembly, meeting here in Williamsburg, was a latecomer in the field of representative government. The first was an organization known as the League of Five Nations, or the Iroquois League. It was established sometime prior to 1600 to unite 5 Iroquoian nations in order to solve mutual problems. This Iroquois beaded belt tells the story of the member nations uniting. They adopted an oral constitution and a governing council of 50 representatives. The council dealt with items affecting the entire group, but left purely tribal matters up to each individual Iroquois nation. The original 5 were the Onondaga, depicted in a Turtle Clan meeting here, the Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, and Mohawk nations. 104 years after its formation, the League added a 6th nation, the Tuscarora. Women had a strong voice in the Iroquois society. The clan mother selected the chiefs and was the most powerful figure in a strong local form of government. Iroquois women owned the family crops and houses and had voting rights. Although outnumbered by rival Algonquian tribes, the Iroquois became the dominant force in the Northeast following the formation of the Iroquois League. That league continues to operate today. Artist Oren Lyons is a sub-chief in the Turtle Clan in the Onondaga Nation. He teaches Native American studies at Buffalo University. The Onondaga chief says the U.S. governmental ideals can be traced to the Iroquois League. Prior to drawing up his Albany Plan of Union for the colonies in 1754, Benjamin Franklin requested a meeting with the Iroquois League chiefs to learn more about the Indian Confederacy. Chief Lyons recounts the substance of the meeting between colonial leaders and the Iroquois chiefs.
And it was suggested at that time by an Onondaga chief that the colonies unite in a form of government that was similar to ours, that would represent the people. The format is very ancient, and this is the format that was taken by the 13 colonies originally, the Articles of Confederation.
There is ample evidence that Franklin was influenced by the Iroquois Confederacy when he did draw up the Albany Plan. Moreover, that plan was followed essentially more than 20 years later in the Articles of Confederation, the forerunner of the United States Constitution. Ben Franklin put it this way in his argument for colonial union.
It would be a very strange thing if 6 nations of ignorant savages should be capable of forming a scheme for a union, and yet that a like union should be impracticable for 10 or a dozen English colonies to whom it is more necessary.
In addition to Franklin, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were familiar with the Iroquois League. The founders of our nation were facing the problem of uniting sovereign states when they wrote the United States Constitution. And they did adopt ideas from the Iroquois League.
Well, immediately, always they were warned.
Ray Fadden, a Mohawk, is curator of the Six Nations Museum in Onchiota, New York. An expert on the Iroquois Confederacy, Fadden says our form of government was not born from European ideals.
Over here in America, those chiefs were representatives, something like Congress, I suppose. They simply represented their clans, and since everyone belonged to a clan, in plain English, they represented their people. Were put in office by their people to represent them in their government.
On a December day in 1888, two cowboys looking for stray cattle atop a Colorado mesa became the first non-Indians to view this site. Cliff Palace, a cliff dwelling at Mesa Verde, is just one of a number of construction feats accomplished nearly 1,000 years ago by some amazing Indian people. Their impact on the architecture and urban development of the Southwest is immeasurable. Anthropologists call the people who built the cliff houses members of the Anasazi culture. The culture appeared about the time of Christ. At first, the Anasazi lived in caves, giving no hint of their future architectural brilliance. Corn was their only crop. By 450 AD, the Anasazi began creating permanent housing. The pit house featured the first crude basements in the United States. 4 corner posts provided support for the walls and roof, which were lacings of sticks and brush covered with thick adobe mud. In addition to developing permanent houses, the people learned to make pottery. The turkey was domesticated and beans were added to their corn crops. The Anasazi Pueblo period began developing about 750 AD. Arts and crafts flourished. Trade began. Cotton was introduced, and the bow and arrow became a hunting tool and a weapon. Early in the developmental Pueblo period, the Anasazi began experimenting with stone masonry. This led to the classic Pueblo era, during which these construction geniuses built huge apartment complexes and cliff dwellings that served as early cities. The ruins of Pueblo Bonito at Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, show the remains of what were truly marvelous achievements in stone masonry, engineering, architecture, and urban planning. Pueblo Bonito rose to a height of 5 stories in some places, making the Anasazi the nation's first high-rise apartment dwellers. The complex covered 3 acres and contained 800 rooms in which more than 1,000 people lived. For support, the Anasazi builders made the walls thick at the base, tapering to the top. The outside veneer had the artistic touch of craftsmen. Each stone of the proper size was placed so as to be pleasing to the eye. Unlike their Anasazi brothers at Mesa Verde, the people of Chaco Canyon shunned the cliff sides and did their stone masonry on the canyon floor. The circular rooms were kivas, religious and ceremonial areas that had covered tops when the Anasazi used them. Today, it's difficult to comprehend the skill of those Chacoans who worked with only the most primitive tools. Sandstone was readily available, but ponderosa pine, which they chose for ceiling and floor beams, had to be carried 17 miles from the closest forest. Even more striking is the fact that Pueblo Bonito was a planned community from its beginning. During the 150 years it took to complete Pueblo Bonito, each succeeding generation's work fit the concept of the early designers. Of all the pioneer apartment complexes in the Southwest, Pueblo Bonito is the most significant. It was the nation's first real city, and it remained the biggest apartment complex in the United States until 1882, when a larger one was constructed in New York City. Those pioneer urban developers, the Anasazi, built their apartment complexes on canyon floors, on mesa tops, and in hundreds of cliffside caves. To anyone with a fear of heights, the first question is always, why would anyone live in cliff caves? They had to climb to the mesa tops to tend their crops and obtain water, so why live in the cliffs? The most logical answer appears to be for protection against marauding enemies. But why did these people abandon their great apartment cities all across the Southwest shortly before the year 1300? Probably because of an extended drought that hit about that time. Perhaps another reason. No one really knows. Today we can only marvel at the contributions of the ancient Anasazi. What happened to the prehistoric Anasazi people? Their descendants are today's Pueblo Indians of New Mexico and Arizona. The Anasazi's long-standing desire for urban living is evidenced in Pueblo towns like Acoma, Sky City. Pueblo Acoma claims to be the oldest continuously occupied town in the United States, a claim that is contested only by the Hopi town of Old Oraibi. Both have been inhabited for about 1,000 years. The impact of the Anasazi builders is clearly evident in the classic village of Taos Pueblo in northern New Mexico. It has no running water, no electricity, no modern conveniences at all. Yet Taos Pueblo has a beauty that reflects the Anasazi architecture of 1,000 years ago. Taos dwellings are stair-stepped up to 5 stories high. Like their ancestors of long ago, residents of the upper floors must use ladders to come and go. Old beehive-shaped ovens are still fired up each day by Taos Pueblo women, for there is bread to be baked. This has been the daily ritual among Pueblo women for centuries, and none of today's electric or gas-heated ovens does a better job of baking bread than those old adobe kilns. With increased concern over energy shortages, modern builders are grappling with problems of heating and air conditioning. The Pueblo Indians whipped these problems long ago. Their thick adobe clay dwellings are cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Today's engineers call it utilizing mass to achieve better insulation. In case you have any doubt about the architectural contributions of the ancient Anasazi and their Pueblo descendants, just look around the Southwest. Pueblo influence is seen nearly everywhere.
We'll be back with more than bows and arrows right after this.
It's a reservation of education. It's a reservation of education. Big yellow bus took me away.
Kids don't come with instructions on keeping them drug-free. But if they did, this is what they'd say. Call to find out what else you can do.
Kenneth and Gloria Copeland are coming to Anchorage, Alaska, and want to invite you to the 2001 Anchorage Victory Campaign. Don't miss these exciting meetings February 1st through 3rd at the Anchorage Christian Center. For more information, call the number on your screen.
Native American contributions in the field of agriculture are many and varied. Corn, or maize, first domesticated in Mexico, is the best-known crop of Indians of the Americas. Among the leading native agronomists were the Arikaras, a northern farming tribe who developed 7 different varieties of maize, including one strain that would mature quickly in a short growing season. As horticulturalists, Native Americans have a record that few races can match, domesticating more than 40 plants. None of the foods cultivated by natives was known to the Old World, including the white potato, which somehow became labeled the Irish potato. All the food on this table was developed by native people of the Americas. Of the world's production of leading food crops, 42% by weight is composed of 3 Native American crops: corn, potatoes, and peanuts. Measured in dollar value, 48% of the leading food and economic crops produced in the United States was domesticated by Indians. That is agricultural impact. It's not difficult to trace the impact of native influences upon the destiny of this nation. You just have to look to colonial times. This is a replica of Fort James, the site of the first permanent English settlement in the New World. When the British colonists arrived at Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, their first task was the construction of the stockaded Fort James on the banks of the James River. Tribes of the Powhatan Confederacy made it possible for the colony to succeed. As it was, the Jamestown colony almost did not survive. There is no doubt that without the aid of the Powhatan Indians, the colony would have perished from starvation. Jamestown was settled 13 years before the Mayflower brought the Pilgrims to Plymouth, Massachusetts. Had the English colonies failed, the United States today could easily be a Spanish or even French possession. But the Spanish had established a colony in Florida, and the French were actively trading in the Northeast. Just as at Jamestown, Indians showed friendship initially to the Plymouth colony, taught them to plant corn and other crops with methods suitable to the climate of this foreign land, and in general aided their survival. Pocahontas, the daughter of Chief Powhatan, was one of the Indians whose gifts of food and advice on crop planting helped the colonists survive the first few difficult winters. You're looking at a piece of flint, a stone highly prized by prehistoric Indians. This particular flint is found only in a 10-mile area of the Texas Panhandle. It's called the Alabates Flint Quarries. Between 500 and 1,000 open-pit mines here were worked by Indians beginning as early as 12,000 years ago. Those people were among the first to employ mining techniques in North America. They had a variety of uses for flint, including axe heads and projectile points. Normally, flint has one characteristic shade, but Alabates flint has a multitude of bright colors and patterns. It holds a sharp edge when chipped and flaked. Alabates flint obviously was a valuable trade item, for it has been found at archaeological digs far away from the Texas Panhandle. Long before whites arrived, Native Americans mined such substances as copper, lead, mica, and coal, while south of the Rio Grande, silver, gold, platinum, and jade were mined. Today in Arizona, Montana, the Dakotas, Idaho, and Wyoming, Indian people are working to gain control over natural resources on their own lands, some choosing to mine for coal, uranium, oil, and gas, others waiting for hard evidence on the environmental impact of such mining. The native medicine man has been viewed by some as a faker using spiritualistic hocus pocus. However, many of the medicine men were skilled herbalists who regularly used over 200 medicines and drugs that later were included in official pharmaceutical manuals. Moreover, several experts on Indian healing methods now agree that medicine men, with their masks and rattles, had success in psychotherapeutics. They were early psychiatrists. Dr. Robert Bergman of the University of New Mexico Psychiatry Department worked with Navajo medicine men for 6 years.
Well, I was surprised initially at how good they were. I suppose I came with my own share of stereotypes and prejudices, and I had read some that indicated they were of great value. I don't suppose I really believed it until I saw it, and sometimes I saw some very remarkable cures. They were good healers. They were good doctors. What they were best at are things that psychiatrists do today.
There are other Indian contributions to technology. Remember our canal-building friends, the Hohokams? Those amazing people also gave the world this first, the first etching process ever developed. This etched shell, a Hohokam work of 900 years ago, predates the first European etching process by 450 years. Here at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., one can also find out that the Indians discovered rubber and invented the syringe. The snowshoe is a Native American invention. Eskimos devised the parka and other cold weather apparel, along with snow goggles. Most of the Eskimo snow goggles were made of wood or ivory, with tiny slits to protect the eyes from sun glare. Transportation on waterways was by canoe, and the maritime masterpieces were the dugout canoes. This 50-year-old film shows the dugouts of the Kwakiutls, a northwest coast tribe. The dugout was as seaworthy a craft as was ever designed. The Northwest dugout makers fashioned their craft from huge cedar trees. Prior to the white man's arrival, most small canoes were made from bark or animal skins. They were the models for today's recreational canoes seen on lakes and waterways everywhere. Modern whitewater racers can salute the Eskimos for inventing the kayak. The Eskimos used the kayak for fishing and seal hunting because of its maneuverability, the exact reason the whitewater racers enjoy competing in kayaks today. Design features have not changed measurably since the time the prehistoric Eskimos used them. The impact of this native craft is seen in worldwide sports competition.
Thank you, 13th Regional Corporation, for contributing more than bows and arrows to Heartbeat Alaska. Thank you for joining us on today's program. If you'd like more information on this documentary, give us a call at 907-563-7440. For all of us here, God bless every single one of you, and we'll see you again for more Native news, more Native information next week.
As the purple sunset fades, are we really here alone on the main street of the world, relocated from our homes, and all that's real seems so far away, sacrificing tomorrow for yesterday. There's a heartbeat louder than thunder, revolution is in the air. There's a heartbeat deep inside our mother. Are you too cool to care? You, one so clever, never speak too soon. You, one who knows better to be sly.